The United Kingdom and Commonwealth realms have a new king. On September 8, 2022, at the moment of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II's death, Charles, as her heir apparent, acceded the throne. Within hours, it was announced that he would reign under the regnal name of Charles III, ending years of speculation that he might choose a different moniker, possibly that of his grandfather George. Another matter of contention was the title his wife, Camilla, would use. That too was cleared up when it was confirmed that she would be Queen Consort. She is, in fact, the first Queen Consort of England to have been born a commoner in 475 years, since Henry VIII died in 1547 and his final wife, Catherine Parr, was downgraded to Queen Dowager. On September 10, 2022, the Accession Council met at St. James's Palace, as they have since 1603, to declare Charles king. More about that later. However you may feel about Charles and Camilla personally, or the monarchy in general, they are the modern link in a chain going back 1,000 years. Let's take a look at the fascinating, often controversial lives of the new King Charles III and Camilla, Queen Consort of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth realms. Charles was born at Buckingham Palace on November 14, 1948. When he was still a baby, his father's naval career took him to Malta, and his mother traveled there as well, leaving Charles behind in the care of his grandparents and the royal nannies. When he was 1, he was joined by a younger sister, Anne. The siblings were opposite. Charles was quiet and Anne social and boisterous, but still they were a close pair. When the prince was 3, his grandfather, King George VI, died of lung cancer at just 56. Young Charles watched on as his mother was crowned Queen Elizabeth II. He in turn became heir apparent and Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Rothesay, Earl of Carrick, Baron of Renfrew, Lord of the Isles, and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. The Duchy of Cornwall is a large land and investment portfolio established in 1337 to provide income for the reigning monarch's eldest son. It is currently worth $1.25 billion. The young queen was overwhelmed with her new duties and didn't have much time left to give to her 2 young children. Charles was a sensitive and serious child who never got the affection he so desperately needed from his parents. They, in return, couldn't understand their son or his demands on their attention. When Charles was 4, his mother attempted to share with him her favorite pastime, horseback riding. But the large, fast animals scared the child, and Elizabeth gave up on the attempt to bond with her son. Royal children of the past were educated at home by private tutors, but it was felt that the future king should have more exposure to the world outside the palace. So at 8, Charles was sent to a very posh school to be educated with other children. Prince Philip feared that his son would grow to be weak and vulnerable, so he tried to toughen him up by enrolling him at his own alma mater, Gordonstoun, in northeastern Scotland. The boarding school was rigorous and focused on testing its students' mettle through physical and academic challenges under Spartan conditions. Other students ostracized the prince. No one dared bully him directly, but other students who reached out to befriend him were tormented, and Charles was left isolated and downtrodden. When Charles was 12, his parents, now more comfortable in their roles as sovereign and consort, decided to add to their family. Prince Andrew and Prince Edward were born. The Queen had more time with them than she'd given to Charles and Anne. Next, it was decided that the future king, who was not especially academic, should attend Trinity College, Cambridge, where he read anthropology, archaeology, and history. Charles hated how little choice he was given in his life. Even his friends were pre-selected for him. He spent a semester abroad in Australia and another in Wales, where he learned the basics of the Welsh language ahead of his televised investiture as Prince of Wales, the title held by heirs to the throne dating back to Edward II in the 13th century. Charles became the first heir apparent to earn a university degree. He then went the more traditional route of joining the Royal Navy. In his youth, Charles was encouraged by his family to sow his wild oats, but when the time came, he was expected to settle down with an appropriately royal or aristocratic virgin of his parents' choosing. During a visit to Washington, D.C., U.S. President Richard Nixon tried to set the prince up with his daughter, Tricia, but Charles wasn't interested. He was particularly smitten with one young lady, Camilla Shand. She was born on July 17, 1947, in London. Her father, Bruce, was an army officer turned businessman, and her mother, Rosalind, was the daughter of Baron Ashcombe. Her mother's grandmother was Alice Keppel, one of King Edward VII's mistresses. Camilla has a younger sister, Annabelle, and a brother, Mark. The family was upper class and grew up at The Lanes, an 18th century country estate in Sussex, and a 3-story mansion in the fashionable Kensington neighborhood of London. Camilla had a happy childhood, was an avid reader, and took writing lessons. She attended finishing school in Switzerland and then studied French in Paris. In 1965, she was a debutante. She moved to London and worked as a secretary. She was fired from one job for coming in late after spending the night before out dancing. In the late 60s, she met Andrew Parker Bowles, and they had an on-off relationship for several years. They broke up in 1970, and Andrew began dating Princess Anne. Camilla and the royals were in the same social circles, and she formally met Charles at a party in 1971. They began dating and met each other's families. In 1973, Charles was sent overseas with the Navy, and his relationship with Camilla ended abruptly. It's not clear exactly why. It may be that Charles wasn't ready to settle down, but more likely they were broken up by members of the royal family who felt Camilla was not a suitable future queen. Charles's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, was pushing the prince towards his granddaughter, Amanda Knotchbull, while the Queen Mum favored the Spencer girls, granddaughters of her lady-in-waiting. Within months, Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles in a Catholic ceremony attended by the Queen Mum, Princess Anne, and Princess Margaret. The couple had 2 children, Tom and Laura. In 1979, Lord Mountbatten was assassinated by the IRA. Charles was grief-stricken and leaned on Camilla for support. Andrew approved of his wife's affair with the prince, and he had lovers of his own throughout their marriage. The prince, now in his 30s, was pushed towards Lady Diana Spencer, 13 years his junior. Diana was beautiful, demure, and from the right sort of background. She was the daughter of the Earl of Spencer and part of a noble family dating back to the 15th century. Teenage Diana was in awe of her suitor's royal position, but the two never made a genuine romantic connection. They married on July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral. 750 million people worldwide watched as Diana walked down the aisle in her voluminous 80s Emmanuel's dress, donning the 18th century Spencer family tiara. But the marriage, built on convenience, was far from a fairy tale. The pair had little in common. Charles spent most of their honeymoon on the Royal Yacht Britannia reading. Back home in the UK, the couple moved in to an apartment at Kensington Palace and Charles's recently purchased manor, Highgrove House. Charles soon reconnected with the woman he had wanted to be with in the first place, Camilla. He has denied that he spent the night before his wedding with Camilla, but they picked up their affair shortly after he returned from his disastrous honeymoon. On June 21, 1982, she gave birth to the couple's first child, Prince William. After the delivery, Diana suffered from postpartum depression. She was overwhelmed by her role in the public eye and her troubled marriage. She decided to take baby William with her while she and Charles commenced their first major tour to Australia and New Zealand. While on the visit, Diana was a sensation. Everywhere the couple went, crowds cheered for her, and her face and fashion graced the front pages of newspapers. Prince Charles, used to being celebrated and admired, did not take well to playing backup to his glamorous wife. Diana became pregnant for a second time. She later recalled this pregnancy as the time she and Charles got along the best. Prince Harry was born on September 15, 1984. But their brief marital happiness was not to last. Diana's children were the center of her world. She chose their names, dismissed the palace-appointed nanny and hired her own, and spent as much time with them as she could. She wanted to give them a more normal childhood than was usually afforded royal children. Charles had been raised primarily by nannies and often didn't see his mother for months at a time while she was on tours. He had about the same level of involvement in his own son's upbringing. But Diana was there to change their diapers, take them to and from school, feed them, read them bedtime stories, and cuddle on the couch watching TV. She firmly refused the royal family's advice when it came to raising her sons. She insisted that they attend school with other children, rather than being tutored at the palace as had been traditional. As Diana's star eclipsed Charles's, resentments piled up. Charles would often undermine his wife and shake her confidence by making insulting comments about her dress and appearance right before public engagements. 5 years into the marriage, and the Prince and Princess of Wales were as unhappy as ever. The fairy tale was beginning to show cracks, and the press were picking up on the coldness between them. Beautiful, glamorous, and kind, Diana was much more relatable to and liked by the public than the prince could ever be. So when news of his affair became public, Charles and Camilla got all the blame. His reputation has never fully recovered. Camilla and Andrew divorced in 1994, and Charles and Diana in 1996. Diana continued to live in the public eye, raising her sons with Charles and doing charitable work. But in 1997, her car was chased by paparazzi and crashed, killing her and her fiancé, Dodi Fayed. The public shock and outpouring of grief was enormous. Charles responded immediately with sadness for the death of the mother of his children. Meanwhile, the Queen took over a week to make a statement of mourning, and the public saw her as cold and unfeeling. Charles, now a single parent, did his best to raise his children as their mother had wanted, allowing them more freedom and normalcy than he had been granted. The prince put his foot down and declared his relationship with Camilla non-negotiable. He hired an advisor to rehab both of their public images. Slowly, she began to be seen with him at public events, and she moved in to Clarence House with him in 2003. On April 9, 2005, Charles finally wed the woman he should have married in the first place. His marriage to a divorcee was controversial, but the Queen, the government, and church all approved. As the union of the now middle-aged Charles and Camilla would not result in children who might join the line of succession, it did not require the Queen's official approval. They had a civil union ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. Camilla's son Tom and Prince William served as witnesses. The couple honeymooned in Scotland. As the wife of the Prince of Wales, Camilla was legally the Princess of Wales, but as that title was so associated with the late Princess Diana, she chose to be addressed as the Duchess of Cornwall. Because of her lack of popularity, there were questions as to what her title would be when Charles became king. The never-before-used title of Princess Consort was initially announced. But in the years since, Camilla has been increasingly accepted as a member of the royal family. She is seen frequently with Charles and on her own doing charity work and royal visits and tours. Her Majesty has extended tokens of approval, including loaning Camilla 2 family heirloom tiaras and awarding her the Order of Elizabeth II. In 2022, the Queen announced that it is her sincere wish for Camilla to someday be known as Queen Consort. In recent years, the family has faced increased controversy. Charles's younger brother, Prince Andrew, was embroiled in scandal because of his friendship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein and accusations that he raped an underage girl. Andrew was stripped of his military titles and his charity patronages. Charles has been vocal about distancing himself and the royal family from his disgraced brother. His younger son, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan Markle have stepped away from the royal family and moved to America because of the negative press coverage they received. In a scathing interview with Oprah Winfrey, the couple accused the royal family of neglecting Meghan's mental health and of racism. Charles's exact part in the private family situation is unclear, but he has been seen to be attempting to play peacemaker between his two sons who are now privately feuding. Charles spent 7 decades waiting to be king, the longest of any heir apparent in British history. But he kept very busy. He was a patron of over 400 charities, with particular interest in the environment and climate change. But because these issues are considered political, Charles often courted controversy. The monarch is constitutionally barred from being publicly political, and many fear that Charles will be unable to abide by this rule while on the throne, thus triggering a constitutional crisis. In 2022, the 96-year-old Queen's doctors called her family to her bedside at Balmoral Estate in Scotland. Charles and Camilla, who were at their own nearby estate of Birkhall, along with Anne, Princess Royal, were able to make it to the Queen's bedside to bid her goodbye, while other family members raced north from London. The palace announced in a statement that the Queen had died peacefully, and that the King and Queen Consort would spend the night at Balmoral and return to London in the morning. During the outpouring of grief for the Queen, who had reigned for over 70 years, Charles delivered his first speech as monarch. He thanked his darling Mama for her years of service to her family and her people. As she had done on her 21st birthday, Charles dedicated the rest of his own life to the service of his people. He also stated that he would pass on the political issues that he has championed for decades to others as he assumes the constitutional role of sovereign. He addressed his darling wife as Queen Consort, wished Harry and Meghan well as they build their lives overseas, and created his own son and heir, William, as Prince of Wales, the title he had held for 64 years. On the morning of September 10, 2022, the Accession Council met at St. James's Palace. This historic council has roots in Anglo-Saxon times. Its current iteration has been meeting since 1603, when Queen Elizabeth I died without an heir apparent. The council decided to declare her cousin, the next person in the primogeniture line, King James VI of Scotland, the new King of England. In the intervening 400 years, the Accession Council has met at St. James's Palace shortly after the death of a monarch to officially declare the new monarch. Inside the palace throne room, William, now Prince of Wales, and Camilla, Queen Consort, signed the proclamation, as did the Lords Spiritual and Temporal. This was the first time this historic event has been captured on camera. The last meeting of the council was in 1952, when Elizabeth was declared queen. Back then, television was cutting-edge technology and frowned upon by the royal court. The king gave a speech proclaiming his intentions as monarch, head of the Commonwealth, and defender of the faith. He took an oath to the council and to the Church of Scotland. Outside of the palace in Friars Square, amid fanfare and blasting trumpets, the death of the Queen was announced, and the new king was officially proclaimed by the Garter King of Arms. In the times before lightning-fast media, this would have been the first time the public was made aware of the death of an old monarch and the accession of a new sovereign. The national anthem, "Now God Save the King," for the first time in 70 years, was played by the band and sung by the watching crowd. The King's Guard laid down their weapons and removed their iconic headdresses to give 3 cheers to the new king, Charles III. The date of Charles and Camilla's coronation will be announced in due time and may be over a year away out of respect for the late Queen Elizabeth and to allow time to plan what will certainly be an elaborate event. It remains to be seen what the British monarchy will look like under the new King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla. Want even more tea on history? Check out the History Tea Time podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.